Oh, hi there. Ollie Anderson here. You're listening to Creative Status. If you're new to the podcast, this is a bullshit-free zone where you can kind of meet many of your philosophical, spiritual, emotional, and other kinds of needs, I suppose, or at least get insight that might help you figure out a thing or two. If you've listened to the podcast before and you're brave enough to have returned, well, thank you very much for that. Appreciate it. This episode is an interview with Michelle Sinclair, one of my favorite people on the whole internet. She is a subconscious healer. She uses hypnotherapy in her business, the Real Healing Institute. And basically, she helps people to find inner freedom. She has a thing called the Inner Freedom Formula, which helps people to do that. It's a 3-step process where you can look at your emotional stuff, then you can look at your beliefs, then you can start designing a life that you want and going out there and manifesting and doing all those amazing things that people can do. This is a open, honest conversation that you're about to hear. Basically, we just get into the workings of the subconscious mind, how people get blocked in the first place, what they can do about their blocks, how they can get flowing and growing and moving again. There's loads of really good insight in here. I wanted to do an episode about the unconscious stuff for a long time. Well, I say a long time. The podcast has only been around for a while. But anyway, I really wanted to talk to somebody who knows their stuff about the unconscious mind, because if you have listened to the podcast before, you know I'm always saying that ultimately the creative process is about making the unconscious conscious. And so I thought I better talk to somebody who knows what they're on about. So Michelle, thank you so much for coming on here and giving me all your insight and for sharing your energy and all that kind of stuff. Everybody else, hope you enjoy the episode. If you get something out of it, then please leave a review somewhere if you can be asked doing that. That makes it easier for other people to find the podcast. So that would be awesome if anyone does feel like doing that. If you have any ideas for guests and things like that, then send me a DM on Instagram or somewhere at Ollie J. Anderson. But anyway, here's the interview. Hope you enjoy it. Thank you so much. Boom. Oh, hi there, Michelle. Thank you.
Hello.
Thank you so much for joining me today on this episode of Creative Status. Obviously, the listeners might not know this, but we have had many conversations that have not been recorded. I think this is the first one that we've recorded, so we're gonna have to watch what we say. We don't want to end up in jail or anything. But before I get into asking you a bunch of questions about your work as a hypnotherapist and a healer, and a philosopher and a spiritual weirdo, if you don't mind me saying, would you like to introduce yourself? Do you want to tell us, who you are, what you do, what you stand for, and what you want to get out of this conversation?
Sure. So I'm Michelle Sinclair, and I own the Real Healing Institute, which is basically a subconscious healing program. And what I do is I take my clients, they come to me with problems like anxiety or depression or past trauma, things like that. And we very quickly and very easily resolve these issues using subconscious healing. So what I do is different than, what it would be like if you were to go to a counselor or a therapist. I'm working only with the subconscious mind.
Wow.
So I, take my clients back and have them follow these feelings that they have that they don't want to have and find where they come from, heal it, and then they have success. They don't need these coping tools and mechanisms to deal with it. They just don't have their issues anymore.
Wow.
There's, real healing that goes on and it's very rapid.
Wow. So that's the main reason I wanted to talk to you on this podcast, the subconscious stuff. So a theme that comes up like over and over again on this podcast, which is about the creative process, is that living a real life, being a real human being, moving towards wholeness and connection to ourselves and all this stuff, is ultimately about making the unconscious or the subconscious conscious, something that we're aware of. And a lot of people are out there, they're running around, they've got all these problems in life, anxiety, depression, maybe they got creative blocks, they feel stuck, blah, blah, blah. They've got all this stuff going on. And it's almost always because they're denying something unconsciously. Like they might not be aware of it, obviously. That's why it's
Mm-hmm.
unconscious.
Yeah, very true.
But those things going on down there seem to cause most of the issues in our lives, and also the good things as well, if we can embrace them. So I suppose the first question, just to open this up, is where do these unconscious blocks come from in your philosophy or in your view?
Well, it totally depends. It's different for everybody. So I have had people regress back to infancy. So that is what I use is hypnosis regression. I do that in, 97% of my clients. So some people will regress back to infancy. They might have been left in their crib when they were a baby, and maybe their parents were just using the cry it out technique, which, I did with my own kids. I didn't know these things back then. And, they felt like, oh, nobody's coming. And it, then made them feel a certain way, like that they weren't lovable or that they weren't safe or, something along those lines.
Okay.
Sometimes people will regress back to the womb to, maybe their mother was having stress. Maybe she consumed something that harmed them when they were in the womb. But typically, it will be, bullying that happened in school. It might be the house that you grew up in. Maybe your parents were not, loving you how they should have been, or something along those lines. And once in a while, typically in children, it will be a past life that might pop up. I didn't actually used to believe in them till I've seen it so many times with my work that I think it's undeniable, or else it's, your DNA passed down through your ancestry or whatever that is. I don't know. But sometimes that'll pop up in kids.
Wow.
But one thing I've noticed is that, people really claim these things as their own. Like they'll say, oh, it's my anxiety, my depression, because they've never, not known that in their life, but it really isn't them. It's something that happened and it's not who they are.
Wow. Yeah. So no matter what the unconscious block is caused by, it's almost always a case I found of something external being internalized, and then they basically hypnotize themselves with these external messages over and over and over again until, like you said, they think it's them. They think that they're the source of the problem, when actually it's just their attachment to all of that stuff which perpetuates the problem. Something like that.
Yeah. 100%.
Okay.
Even something like saying you have an addictive personality. I know people really claim that because they're like, oh, well, I quit this one thing and now I do this other thing. I know from my own personal experience that that's not the case. Once you've healed everything that's in there, that addictive personality that you believed was you doesn't exist anymore. So I think almost everything, actually, I believe everything is all subconscious. Everything that we're doing in our life, the choices that you make in a day, they're still dictated by the program that's running in your subconscious mind.
Yeah. So can people get rid of this program completely, or will it always be kind of affecting them to some extent?
You can get rid of it. It takes some effort. So I have what I've been using here lately is I have an assessment that's on my website. And so you're basically going through all of the emotions. You'd be going through, fear, guilt, shame, anger, resentment, blah, 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 everything. It's all on there. And then we follow all of these things back and heal them. So, we might be going to 50 places. It might be more than that. It might be less than that, where these original scars or samskaras began. Because, nothing comes into our life until it comes into our consciousness. And so we're going back to the initial place where it came into our consciousness and healing it,
Wow. Yeah. So I always look at everything in terms of either wholeness or fragmentation. So I think that the real natural state of a human being is that we are whole, basically. We're connected to ourselves, we're connected to other people in the world, we're connected to reality itself. And that feeling of wholeness is what makes us feel truly alive. And a lot of these blocks that we pick up in our earlier years, they ultimately just cause us to be fragmented, because we end up disowning parts of ourselves or denying certain feelings or trying to hide from them, whatever it is. We become fragmented, and that fragmentation leads us to create a kind of false identity for ourselves. So you kind of alluded to this a bit, like, we'll say that I'm just somebody who has anxiety. I'm just somebody who has depression. I have an addictive personality. I'm just a certain way. Basically, we attach to a certain image of ourselves. Why do you think we need to cling to that image if it's not real? So, do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think that we just play that character, like this. So if you think about who you were 10 years ago,
Mm,
probably very different than you are now. And
mm,
it's almost like a character that you were playing at the time. But when you're
mm,
unaware that that's what's going on, or when
mm,
you're in it at that time, there's, first of all, you're not being thoughtful about your
mm,
life. You're
mm,
not putting any thought into maybe this isn't me.
mm.
Um,
Well,
but once you become aware
yeah.
of what's really going on, then it becomes a choice. You get to
Mm,
choose, like, okay,
mm,
well, we say all these things about ourselves. Well, you can start saying something new, and
mm.
you can choose what you want that to be.
Wow. So we can create ourselves, we can create our lives. And so what you're talking about is the creative process that this podcast is always kind of ranting and raving about. When we face the unconscious and we're aware of the role that it's playing in our lives and we work with it instead of against it, then we have more choice over our lives. We have more choice over who we are, more choice over our emotions. And ultimately, it comes down to the way that we tweak our belief system. Would you say that's true?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say when you become aware of the vibration that you're operating in,
Mm,
so the state that you're going through your day, and
mm,
when you realize that that actually matters, then
mm,
you can consciously choose to, okay, I'm not going to indulge in these lower vibrational thoughts. And
mm,
so you
mm,
know what I mean by that, but for people listening that don't know, um, let's say that you want revenge, or you're feeling guilt, or you're feeling
wow,
fear about something. Just notice how that physically feels in your body,
mm,
and notice what it does to your energy when you
mm,
shift to a belief like that, or to a thought
mm,
like that. And
mm,
our thoughts are just energy.
mm,
So when you realize, oh, this is a choice, I don't need to think about these ridiculous things that aren't true and that are fear based and that are depleting my energy, and
mm,
you choose to think about other things,
mm.
everything in your life just changes.
Yeah, this is something that I've found in my own life, and like with the lives of my clients, people I've worked with. I always say, if you put something real into your life, you'll get something real out. And if you put in unreal things
Mhm.
in, you'll get unreal stuff out. And so if you're making that choice for fragmentation, you're constantly, giving in to all these kind of negative emotions, anger, guilt, shame, all the different things, the different ways this can show up, then that is going to affect the choices you make, like you said, and your life is going to eventually be a reflection of those choices. So if somebody's, stuck in life, or they do feel like they're in one of those low energy places, there's a lot of frustration in their lives, there's a lot of restlessness, a lot of misery, maybe, and all those kind of things. What's a process that they can go through to start kind of evolving beyond that? So I know you've got this thing, the IFF. Maybe now's a good time to bring that in. But what steps can they take, like tangible steps?
So, yes, so the IFF is the Inner Freedom Formula. So that's the program that I use. So we begin by assessing the emotional state. So, like I had said before, there's that assessment on my website. It's got, I don't know, probably 25 or 30 things on it.
Mm,
Um, So you basically identify, like, okay, maybe I guess I am a little bit depressed. Okay, maybe I am a little anxious. And you actually, when you're, doing this and you're seeing for yourself, like, oh, I guess there are these areas, all of those areas that are showing up are depleting your energy. So
Mm-hmm.
we start by subconsciously healing those things,
Mm-hmm.
because once you've gone back and you've healed something, you don't got to keep going back and healing that thing. It's good now. um,
Mm-hmm.
and so we start with that, then we go to the belief shifting.
Mm-hmm.
So by that I mean, do you expect negative things to happen in your life? Because when you expect them to happen, they are going to happen. So we change these expectations and these subconscious beliefs that most people don't even know that they have. So,
Mm-hmm.
like, for example, let's say somebody seems to have a problem that other people don't have. Like, oh, I have a problem making friends, or,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I have a problem with people at work. There will be some type of subconscious belief that is attracting that to them through these
Mm-hmm.
expectations that they have. So,
Mm-hmm.
then we heal the beliefs that are there, and then we move on to the freedom stage. And so these steps, that I'm talking about, they do not take very long because it is rapid healing. Hypnosis is proven scientifically to be the fastest way to change the neural pathways in your brain. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so as we change these things, we then move on to the freedom part, which is really just connecting with the divine. So
Mm-hmm.
basically, at that point, we have removed all of the barriers that are there that have kept you separated from this divine flow. And so then we get into that freedom, which is really just raising your vibration, connecting you with the divine, and that is where you really begin to actually see things change in your life.
Mm-hmm. So this is really interesting. So, what your final stage of freedom is ultimately what I'm talking about when I talk about wholeness. It's you've returned to your natural state. You've integrated all the things that you need to integrate, and because of that, there are less barriers between you and life, and so you can actually flow in the direction that you need to flow in to live the life that you want to live, basically.
Yes.
And when I'm coaching people, I go through a 3-step process as well. The first one is deconstructing the ego. So ultimately, raising awareness of how our identity is holding us back from the truth. That's the abridged version,
Mm-hmm.
raising awareness. Then, once we've done that, the second stage is to start facing the shadow self, which is about acceptance ultimately. But it's acceptance of yourself, acceptance of the world, the way that it works, and acceptance of reality. When you've done that, you can get onto the last stage, which is about building or manifesting a real life where you can actually go out there and start doing the things that you want to do, being the person you want to be, and having the things that you want to have. The problem is that a lot of people, they leap right to the last stage. So they'll try and build a life for themselves before they've done the emotional work or before they've healed their beliefs, and then they won't get the results that they want because ultimately, there's a saying I'm always throwing out: they're rearranging the furniture on the Titanic whilst it keeps sinking. And
Mm-hmm.
unless you do that emotional work and look at your beliefs, you're just wasting your time because everything you're doing is going to be unreal. So,
Mm-hmm.
two questions there for you. So, the first question is normally when people try to heal themselves, when they realize there's a problem, they'll go and do something like talking therapy, which has been shown to be quite ineffective. Like it takes hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of sessions with a psychotherapist
Mm-hmm.
to maybe get some results. So
Yeah.
they'll try and do something like that. Why doesn't that work, or why is it not as effective as going straight to the fundamental problem, which is the unconscious mind? So,
I think because they're just completely unaware. So, many of my clients have absolutely no idea that the area
mm,
that we regress back to
mm,
ever affected them. They maybe consciously don't even remember it. And so
mm,
you could talk
yeah,
for
yeah,
years about it, and
yeah,
if you're not healing the root of the problem there, it's just always going to be there running in the background.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I honestly believe that
Wow.
the only effective way is the subconscious way. Yes, there is definitely, sometimes you'll hear something and it'll, spark change
Mm-hmm.
in your mind.
Mm-hmm.
But I believe that subconscious healing is, well, it's the best way. I've seen it, and I've had
Mm-hmm.
friends that are counselors and they're like, oh, it's just so draining. It's so hard to listen to these people's
Yeah.
things
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then they keep coming back. I'm like, that is not the case for me
Yeah.
because they
Yeah.
come to me and they feel better when they leave.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a thing in like the world of psychotherapy and all those kind of talking professions. It's called compassion fatigue, where they basically burn themselves out. They get so tired
Mm-hmm.
of just going around in circles with people and just hearing the same old shit day in and day out without things actually changing. And I think it's
Yeah.
because they're only dealing with the level of the conscious mind, like you're saying. So they just, they're looking at all this stuff, all these interpretations that people have about their past already. Basically, they're trying to use the problem, which is the conscious mind, and the way that it's been constructed because of all these emotional blocks and everything. They're trying to use the conscious mind, the problem of the conscious mind, to solve the problem of the conscious mind. So they're not going to get anywhere. So
Yeah.
when you do this subconscious healing, we should probably point out you don't just talk about it. Like you're giving people an experience of something they haven't previously had. Is that a
Yes.
fair way to say it?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
can you just walk us through that process a bit? So it's not just talking about it, is it?
No. So I follow the feelings that are there. So
Mm,
So here's another interesting thing. So let's say that you have depression or anxiety, something like that. So if you
mm,
were to think about that, if you were to bring it up, you physically can feel it in your body.
mm,
So,
mm,
some people might feel it. Oh, I feel it in my wrist and my ribs or my knees and my feet or my chest or my stomach, wherever they feel it.
mm,
So
mm,
the interesting thing about this is that if you let that continue on, if you don't deal with that, that place that you're feeling that in your body is depleting your energy. So anytime that you're feeling that there, it's,
mm,
taking away
mm.
from the whole energy that should be there in that part of your body. So
Wow.
eventually, you're going to end up with, physical issues in these particular places. So what we do, I get people nice and relaxed. It's a very enjoyable experience, although it can be emotional.
Mm,
Um, but we're in and out of there
mhm,
in about an hour and a half, and so we get nice and relaxed. Then I have them bring these feelings up once they're in the proper state. So
wow.
it's the
Wow.
the theta state. So you go in and out of this several times throughout a day. It's a completely natural state. People hear the word hypnosis and they're like, "Oh, that's crazy."
Mm,
And
mm,
it's really not. You go in it when you're driving down the highway and you find yourself zoning out and you realize, like, oh man, I'm not even paying attention. That's called
mm,
highway hypnosis. So
been
you were
there.
probably, yeah, coming up with some creative ideas while you're driving and not really paying attention. And your brain just slipped into the theta state. So
Mm, mm,
we get into this state and we follow those physical feelings back. So whatever the emotion is that's attached to that physical feeling, we follow it back. And so once you go back, you're just really in your memories. Your subconscious mind holds every
mm.
memory you've ever had. It
Wow.
remembers what your closet looked like when you were a
Mm,
little kid and what toys you would have had in there. It remembers everything. So we follow these feelings back and we see what that younger version of you needed,
mm,
and then we heal
mm,
it, and we always heal it with love, because every problem that we have in our life comes from a belief that we're not lovable.
mm, mm.
So all these
Yeah.
fears, all of these, everything that comes up is all just the root of it is a
Mm,
belief of I'm not
mm.
lovable. So
Yeah.
we heal it with love. um, and so as we do this, you physically can feel the relief in your body,
Mm,
and you just can feel the energy shift and change. And
mm.
then we follow these feelings forward
Wow.
into the future and see that, they're not there anymore.
Mm,
And so when we're done a session, immediately, you feel better. Some people are tired, some people are energized. It just totally depends on the person.
mm,
Um, but you just feel better. You feel like a weight has been
mm,
lifted off your shoulders.
mm,
Lots of people tell me they can breathe deeper,
mm.
and that they just feel lighter. Colors look brighter. Really,
Wow.
things just look different.
Yeah. It makes sense because actually, when people are in this fragmented state where they feel like, they need healing for whatever reason, because they, whatever reason, when they're in that
Mhm.
state, they're stuck in their head. But by the end of a session like this, they're actually back in their bodies. And this is something I've found many times now, like just talking to people in general. People who have the most problems in life spend too much time in their heads. Like it's kind of
Mhm.
an obvious cliche thing, but by bringing them back to their bodies, you're bringing them back to reality. And that reminds me, actually, when you were talking, it reminded me of something that I read in a manual you sent me. So you co-authored a hypnosis manual. You sent me
Mhm.
it to check out. There was a line in there which kind of blew my mind a little bit. It said that, I can't remember verbatim the exact words. It was something like, hypnosis is just contact with the real you, something like that. And I thought that was really powerful. And it also kind of changed my paradigm around hypnosis, because before I read that, I just seen all these movies and stuff where you think that
Mhm.
people, you can hypnotize them into doing all these terrible things that they don't want to do, or to pretend to be like, I don't know, like chickens or whatever. But
Yep.
actually, the premise in this manual was that, right, when you get hypnotized, it just puts you in touch with the real version of who you are. And basically, the hypnotherapist will guide you into doing things, but you'll only do them if it's really what you want to do. And so,
Yeah.
actually, that process is so powerful because it's putting people back in touch with the real version of who they are. And actually, for me in the work I do, that is what the creative process is as well. Like, if you want to create something of value, or you want to just enjoy your life in a creative way, you need to get in touch with your realness, with the real you. And so, actually, maybe we can say that the difference between this kind of subconscious work that you're doing and things like psychotherapy is that hypnotherapy, basically, you're giving people an experience of the real version of who they are, which they can take out
Mhm.
into the rest of their lives. And because, like I said earlier, real in, real out is the way to get results. Well, obviously, that's going to be very beneficial. But in comparison, psychotherapy, you're going into one of those sessions more often than not. Nothing against psychotherapists, if anyone's listening and they are a psychotherapist. But anyway, you're going into these sessions and you're feeling unreal, okay, but all you're doing in those sessions is talking about the unreal version of yourself. You're just talking about all the
Mhm.
reasons you're unreal, how you became unreal. You're talking about it in an unreal way because you're only looking at the symptoms, rearranging the furniture on the Titanic, and you're not going deeper into being able to experience your real version of yourself. So one of these approaches is very real, but the other one is actually quite unreal if you think about it. And to me, this is just validation that real always works. Is the way to go. So
Mhm.
before I ask more questions, what do you think about all that stuff I just said in terms of hypnosis puts you in touch with the real version of you?
It really puts you in control. So,
Mm,
we're
mm,
basically always out of control when we're not in that mind. So, like
yeah.
willpower would be a good example. So let's say somebody, they don't want to eat a whole box of cookies, but yet they do it anyways. So they're out of control.
Mm,
And what you can do using the subconscious mind is take control back, because your conscious mind
wow.
is like, oh, I'm not going to do that. And your subconscious mind is like, yeah, you are. We've always done that. So we're just going to keep on doing it. So the
Mm,
two minds are fighting each other.
yeah.
And so basically, when you go in the subconscious, you are then choosing, you're putting yourself
Yeah.
back in control, and you're making the
Yeah.
subconscious agree with what
Wow.
you consciously want. And so you're gaining control back. So, people think, oh, I don't want to be out of control, in a hypnosis session, or have someone else controlling me. It is totally not that at all. That's just a misconception.
Mm,
Um, it's the opposite of that. You are then gaining control. Of course, like anything, like drugs, they can be used for good or evil or whatever you want. So maybe there is some bad guys out there using it for bad things, but that's definitely not the way that I operate or any of my colleagues operate. We're truly helping people.
Yeah, but you could be evil if you wanted to be. That's
I
always
could
good to
be.
know. Okay.
Yeah, it's true.
So, with what you're saying about the conscious mind, you can use that to take control of your life if it's aligned with what's going on in the subconscious. Do you think there's an element as well where if people are disconnected, so they're out of alignment between the unconscious and the conscious, then the conscious mind is going to be taking them in a direction that they don't want to go in as also. And that's not, obviously that is impacted by the subconscious stuff, but it's also, so like the things that they're aware of on a day-to-day basis are, they're limited in their capacity for taking them where they want to be. Does that make sense?
Oh, totally. Yeah. I think it's just awareness, total awareness. When you realize that you actually can take control and that the things that are happening in your life you're not the victim to them. You're
Mm,
creating them through
mm,
your beliefs and through the way that you feel. When you realize that you are not the victim, but the
mm,
creator,
mm.
then, you can take control. You can make different choices.
Yeah.
But until you're aware of that, you're just unaware of that. You just have no idea. You're going through life and just thinking, "Oh, this thing happened and that thing happened," and you're you're taking it at face value rather
Mm,
than realizing, like, "Oh, okay,
mm,
I maybe created this. So what
mm,
can I do to change that so it doesn't keep happening?"
mm. There's a famous quote by Carl Jung where he says basically, until you discover the unconscious mind, it's just going to rule your whole life. And, you'll call it God or you'll call it whatever. But
Mm-hmm.
basically, the day you discover that it is your unconscious mind, which is affecting your conscious awareness and all of the choices you make according to that, until you discover that, your life's just going to be chaos, basically, because it's not going to be your life. It's going to be a condition of all those external things that we picked up that you were talking about at the start: the bullies, the
Mm-hmm.
parents, society itself, blah, 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 blah.
Yep.
So, how can people speed up the process, I guess, of becoming more in touch with their unconscious mind? So obviously they can book a session with someone like you, but if someone's just listening to this and they're starting to think, wow, okay, maybe I need to you know dive a little deeper than I'm currently doing, and I need to figure out what's going on down there. What are some practical things they can start doing, maybe?
Well, one thing they could do, if somebody wants to do some work for free, is I have my YouTube channel, and it's got the mental cleanse series on there.
Right.
And so um, this is a series that's got 36 videos in it, and it basically walks people through the mother wounds, the father wounds, sadness, anger, frustration, all a ton. There's 36 videos in this, so they can start going through that because the process that I use in there is all subconscious. So
Mm,
most things that you would find on YouTube, that's hypnosis, is just direct suggestion. So this is, somebody getting you nice and relaxed, putting you in the theta state, and then just telling you things, and either you're going to agree with them or you're not.
mm,
Whereas what I am doing is
wow.
different than that. We're actually, changing the energy that's there. We're regressing back. We're going to these things, and then I'm having you heal them. So, even things like that, if people just took some time out of their day
Mm,
to, like,
mm,
for
mm,
personal growth,
mm,
um, they could start to, work on themselves and see where these things are coming from. And they will notice a
mm.
change happen in their life.
Wow. So where do people find those videos? What's your YouTube
Uh,
username?
it's it's called the Real Healing Institute,
Right. Okay.
and that series is the Mental Cleanse
Right.
series.
Okay.
And so
I'll
there's
share
just a
I'll share that
playlist.
in the show notes. Okay, brilliant.
Okay.
So they can do that. Are there any other kind of things that people can do to actually work on
Uh,
this?
they can start doing self hypnosis. They can do meditation. Even just journaling, because journaling is subconscious. I know that you have that awesome journal that you've put out there that's really great. And so that is all subconscious. Anytime that you're writing from your
Mm,
hands,
mm,
it
mm,
is subconscious. So, somebody could even take, let's say that they've been ruminating about something, which is a pretty common thing to happen. If someone's been ruminating about something, just writing it down, um, because it gets it out
mm,
subconsciously, it gets it out, and
mm,
then you don't need to keep thinking about it.
mm,
Um, and I would say, I know, so there's Esther Hicks, and she talks about, raising your vibration. And if something's bothering you, just don't think about it,
mm,
which I somewhat agree with. But at the same time, I think that we need to heal these things.
mm,
Um, and
mm.
then once we've healed them, then we can live in that state. But if there's things that are unresolved, your mind is always going to try to pull you back to them.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Or it's going to keep repeating them in your life, right? You're in
yeah,
an abusive
yeah.
relationship. That's just going to keep happening until you actually heal it.
Mm,
So,
yeah, yeah. This is actually a perfect segue into the next question that I wanted to ask you. So, if people, they do have these unconscious things that they need to work on, then almost always there's going to be signs in their life, like you said, the same patterns repeating in relationships or the same scenarios and issues that are going to keep popping up. There are things that are going to keep happening that you can almost reverse engineer by looking at them and analyzing them, telling them what they need to work on, basically. So the question was
mhm.
going to be like, if our unconscious experience is dictating our life, can we look at the current state of our life, the way things are, and we can kind of reverse engineer what's going on inside of ourselves or even inside of other people?
Absolutely.
Mm,
So, I really believe in reaping and sowing. I've seen it. I've had this enlightening experience and was just shown all kinds of amazing things.
mm,
Um, so, what I mean by that is that everything, absolutely everything that we're doing, the thoughts that we have, the choices that we make, and the actions that we take are all dictating our current circumstances. So,
mm,
it's similar
mm,
to karma, but most people don't take into account their thoughts, which
mm,
your thoughts are energy.
mm.
That's why you could sit at home, physically do nothing all day, and be completely exhausted depending on
Yeah,
what you're thinking
yeah,
about.
yeah,
Thoughts burn
yeah.
calories, they take energy.
Wow,
So if you were to look at your
wow.
current life and truly be honest with yourself, um, the current circumstances that you're in are essentially your own fault. You've created them. You weren't aware.
Mm, yeah,
You're just unaware of these things. But the things that you're experiencing come from your
wow.
fears,
Yeah.
come from the beliefs that you hold, come from things that you've done in the past that are now coming back to you.
Mm,
Um, but the biggest thing is it comes from your thoughts and your fears and your beliefs, because fears
mm,
are
mm,
very
mm,
powerful
mm,
emotions.
mm, mm.
Um, and as you're putting those out into the world through the law of cause and effect, which we
Mm,
know is true, it
mm,
comes back to
mm,
you. And,
mm.
so the more you worry, the more you have to worry about.
Yeah, it's so
So,
true. Like I've experienced this as well. I've seen it in people's lives that I've worked with. Basically, the law of attraction is real in that sense, and it's even if you just look at it at the most simple, basic level of choice, like we've alluded to many times throughout this conversation now. If you have all this unconscious stuff going on that is going to affect your beliefs, then that is going to affect the choices that you make. And those choices over time are going to affect the state of your life because it's going to affect
mhm,
what you think is possible. It's going to affect the actions that you take or don't take. And all of that builds up to the current status quo of your life, whatever that is
mhm,
right now. Now, obviously,
mhm,
when people first become aware of this, if they're in that victim mindset that you kind of talked about, then that seems very offensive because if life
mhm,
sucks and you're in that victim place, you don't want to actually acknowledge that maybe it's your choices that have created that life for you. Like I had this in my own life like years and years and years ago before I started becoming more aware of all these things. But actually, when you learn that you have this choice and that you can take responsibility for your life just by changing your focus ultimately. And if we look at what we're saying, basically the short version is your unconscious mind dictates your focus, and your focus will affect your life. It'll affect what you do, what you get, blah, 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 blah. But at first, that can seem quite daunting and it can seem unfair. But when you wake up to it, it's actually a very powerful thing because it shows you that you do have so much power over your life. You can choose things, that your inner state basically can affect your outer state. The only thing is that I've noticed as well, sometimes there's a bit of a lag, isn't there? So like, let's say,
Yeah.
I might wake up tomorrow and I become aware of my unconscious blocks. I start making changes. Reality is not going to change straight away. Probably it's going to take, like a few months or whatever for things to catch up with my inner state as I make those incremental choices and, using the law of cause and effect, like you said, start being the cause of better effects in my life, basically. So that was a ramble and a rant at you, but what do you think about all that?
Yeah, that's totally true. So that's kind of the difference between true change, right? So when people realize and they're like, oh no, like I'm in a good state now. Why aren't these good things happening? Well, if you truly changed and you were truly in that good state, then, well, you wouldn't want to revert back to the old way because you're not seeing results right away because you would feel so good that you're like, okay, no, I'm just going to keep this up no matter what because I feel better. So my life is better. So that's why, the subconscious can drag you back because that's just what it does to the easy way, but it isn't the easy way. It's just the old way. Because if it was easy, it would feel good. But it can drag you back in there when you don't see results, then you get that frustration and whatnot, which is why, when I'm working with people, we do that assessment. Okay, so let's just make sure all these things are in the clear and keep them in the clear until we see results.
That's a really important point. And it's more validation that you kind of have to do this in order. You have to work on the emotional stuff. You have to sort your beliefs out. And then you start kind of building the life that you want. Or, in my way of doing it, awareness, acceptance, action. Like, if you don't take the steps in the right order, then you end up being one of these people that is basically trying to fake it until they make it. But because they're faking it, there's a gap between, the inner state and what's actually been projected outside, if that makes sense, because it's fake. And if you fake it, well, obviously it's not going to work. And so actually what you need to do, if you're not getting the results that you want, is to go deeper. It's always a sign that you need to go deeper and, heal this unconscious stuff that you're talking about. And then when you've done that, you'll know that it's done because, whether reality starts changing or not, like you said, you're going to feel good anyway. So you don't care. And paradoxically, when you don't care about changing things, that's when things are more likely to change in the way that you want them to.
Totally.
Yeah.
You're not putting resistance out anymore or because even that feeling of, ooh, I really want this, feel the tension. There's tension that's in that feeling of wanting because it's saying, I don't have it. So when you get to that point of not even wanting anymore, that's when you know that you're free because you're like, oh, I'm good. If it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, I don't really care. Then you're there.
Yeah. Basically, I always look at it as though we're either forcing things or we're flowing. And ultimately, it comes down to that word that you just said, tension. We're either adding tension, which is always ego stuff. For whatever reason, we're basically using our identity to force life because we're normally trying to force away emotions that we don't want to feel. Shame, guilt, and trauma, blah, blah, blah. Or if we're not forcing, we're flowing. We're releasing the tension by basically responding from one moment to the next, moving with life. And that can only happen if there are no unconscious blocks. Do you think on a deeper level, so a lot of this conversation has been about how the unconscious is it's just what's going on inside of us. But do you think there is a deeper level where when you basically heal yourself or you connect to wholeness in the way that we're talking about, so you don't have any unconscious blocks and the unconscious is just doing what it needs to do, then you're more connected to life itself or the universe or God or whatever word people want to use. Is there a deeper level? So eventually it's not just about our relationship with ourselves, but our relationship with everything.
Mm-hmm. Which, well, I've experienced from that enlightening experience that I had last summer, that the deepest level is that absolutely everything is made of love. It's all
Mm,
connected.
mm,
Um, and when you
wow.
can jump into that flow of love, which, I believe it's in everything, it's in all the space that's around us. So, in every cell, there's that bit of
Mm,
space. Well,
mm,
that's the
mm,
place where it resides. It's in the air that's pressing up against our bodies.
mm,
Um, it's in everything.
wow.
And when you get into that space, when you get into that flow, then,
Wow.
it changes and you can manifest like instantly. It's
Mm,
instant, the
mm,
manifestations that you get. So, I'll give you an example of that. When
wow.
I was up at my cabin when I had this experience, and I would go for walks every day out in the nature. It's so beautiful up there. And I was imagining that I was actually sprinkling blueberry seeds as I would walk down this path. And I was in this like aura of light. It was just amazing. So I'm imagining, I'm sprinkling these seeds, and I go down to the store and I talked to the guy there and I said, we're going to have more blueberries than we've ever had this year. So then a couple months later, I go back up, and this is after it should have been blueberry season. But I'm walking down this path where I would go every day, and it was completely blue, like completely blue. It was unbelievable how
Wow.
much was there. So, I had no doubt. I used my words because I
Mm,
knew that this was the case. So I told someone, and I used my words, which are vibration. It created this through actually visualizing,
mm,
sprinkling these seeds, and just
mm,
knowing, that I'm so loved that, of course, this is going to be the outcome. And then I saw it. So it took
wow.
maybe 2 months. I think that was the end of August, and I was there in June. Um, but it took 2 months to actually see this, but I was so excited to go. I was like, oh, I can't wait to go and see all those blueberries. And of course, they were there.
Wow.
So when
And
you get to that state, you speak it
mm,
and it
mm,
happens.
mm. And I think the key thing there is that's like you've literally just said, is that state, the inner state of wholeness is the most creative place you can be. Maybe that's ultimately
Mhm.
the conclusion of this path we put ourselves on with this conversation. But when you're in that inner state of wholeness, of realness, whatever you want to call it, that's when the best stuff is going to pop up for you to
Mhm.
create in the world, whether it's like in an artistic way or in your business or in your life itself or with yourself. That wholeness is the source of all creativity, basically. And I suppose
Mhm.
if you're forcing life through the ego, you're forcing the creative process through the ego. That's the only thing ultimately that stops you from creating the things that you want, either artistically or in any other way. And the
Mhm.
way ultimately to allow yourself to get to that place more is to figure out your unconscious blocks and to get them out the way and to use the creative process as well. Actually, you can do that to be able to be better at that. But anyway, to get rid of the unconscious blocks and to get in that place and then to start doing the things that really matter to you. Um,
Mhm.
so maybe
Yeah.
that sums all this up. But have you got any final words to kind of sum up this conversation? We've covered a lot, like in a short time, like a lot actually. But could you just sum it up? Tell us some final words of wisdom, and also let people know, where they can find you online, so they can follow up on anything they want to.
Well, so I want to talk about here creativity and love. So you will know this, you'll see this, right? Let's say that you go to a bakery and they got the best stuff ever. Well, they're doing it with love. That's why it's so good. Or you see an artist painting and it just like draws you in so much, is because they're doing it from love.
Yeah.
And so these people who are doing this at some point probably had to work through a fear, like, oh, I'm afraid to open this bakery. What if it doesn't work? Oh, I'm afraid to put my art out there. What if it doesn't work? So when they release those subconscious blocks that have been blocking their creativity, and then they can do that, gift for the world that they were here to create, it positively affects everybody in the whole world, because who doesn't want delicious baking and beautiful art? I do.
That's so true.
So people can find me at therealhealinginstitute.com. And basically all of my social media has the same name, The Real Healing Institute. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, I'm on YouTube. And they can go to my website. There's a free assessment under the IFF. And so you can fill it out and you can see these places. And so this is just the emotional assessment. There is one for beliefs as well, but we start out with the emotional assessment. They can go there and they can see the areas that they can start to work on. So they can, if they want to have private sessions with me, of course, they can do that. But they can also, go to YouTube and start working on some of those videos in the Mental Cleanse series and, see those numbers on the assessment change. But these things do happen quite rapidly. So I suggest for people to actually write down, where you're at on this assessment and keep it for yourself so that you can see like, wow, I'll have clients that'll, they'll come to me, their anxiety and depression will be at an 8 out of 10 or this or that. And within, 2 sessions, it's all the way gone. But because it's subconscious, you don't even realize just the effects of it, because it's just your life now and it just feels great. And you don't remember how bad it used to be. So it's good to keep track so that you can see your progress.
This evidence, basically. So I'll share all that stuff in the show notes. But Michelle, this has been awesome. So thank you so much for coming on here. I don't think we are going to go to jail.
Having me.
So that's awesome.
Not yet.
Thanks again. Okay.
Yeah. Thanks so much. All right.